All right, hey, good morning. Oh, this is going to be fun. This is going to be fun. You can already tell. Hey, just want to welcome you again to what we're doing here today. If this is your first week here, hey, special welcome, and just this to get you in the room on it, and then we'll charge forward this week. We're in a series that we've entitled Chain Breaker. We're 5 deep in it as of this week. The first 4 weeks, we just talked about this idea, and we've been walking through the book of Philippians for it. Philippians, New Testament side of your Bibles, open, go to the right, you'll find it. And in Philippians, we've just been looking at the way Paul helps us around these chains that can hold us back from what God's calling us to. That's the way we've played it. We've been looking at, all right, how do we throw them off so that we can live flat out the life God's called us to? In the first 4 weeks, we hit the chain of loneliness, suffering, we hit fear, and last week, pride. This week, we hit a chain that has something to do with this right here, opportunity and apathy. Really, it's the one off to the right, but how do we maximize on the one and avoid the other? And so Paul, we're going to Philippians chapter 2, where Paul's going to talk to us about opportunity and apathy, opportunity and apathy. You know, there's this quote that kicks some things off for me and kind of sets the tone for what we're doing. Years ago, Edmund Burke, the great parliamentarian, he said this. Right? This quote's over 200 years old, right? He said, but Bartlett's book of a familiar quotation or famous quotations had it as of 1968. So it's kind of a big deal. Our culture said, hey, this is at least something that's caught our attention. He said, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Right? Bartlett's book caught it up. People say, hey, it's noteworthy. I wonder, do you agree with that phrase or not this morning? How many of you think there's something to that? Whether or not it's totally true, maybe there's something to it. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Right? You read that and it's almost like I don't need to raise my hand. It's one of those things that kind of comes out as a self-evident truth. Right? There's a reason why you lock your doors at night. There's a reason why you're not going to leave your kids alone in a crowd. There's a reason why you watch the news at night and get all twisted up in the game whenever you see things. There's a reason why you even have a curfew for your teenagers. There's a reason why you can just keep going. It's because we believe that unless there's some check put in place, evil will continue to advance and it'll affect people we care about, right? And even our lives. And so whether we can do something about it physically or emotionally, we're going to do it, right? He said the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. See, and if that's true, what we're dealing with today is this, that we've got our work cut out for us. We really do. Cal Ripken showed me that. Cal Ripken worked for and has worked for the past 25 plus years in countries where Christianity has been persecuted. And we've seen that here on a popular level, ISIS with beheadings and different things like that. More Christians have been persecuted, killed for believing in Jesus in the last century than in all other centuries combined. You get it. He worked in a lot of those countries. And in his book, The Insanity of God, he was just talking about the face of evil. He was in Somaliland back in 1992, a while back. But he said he saw it, got a picture of it. He was there, and as he talks about it, it was a country overcome, Somalia, by war and poverty. It was riddled with landmines. Wells that could bring drinkable water had been sabotaged because the parts you pay for to bring drinkable water, well, those are easily stolen and sold. And so people steal them and sell them. Without drinkable water, crops dried up. Without crops, animals are dying, and there they were. He just said, heaps rotting along the road. It was not a pretty picture. He said, hell on earth, you get it. Right? Just this dark, depressing sort of situation. And then he said, you know what, the only hope he got was this military convoy, this Somali military convoy. They came and he went, all right, here it is. Hope is on the way, hope on a Triscuit, water, food for these people. It's going to happen. They back the trucks up and he's ready. They start unloading, but it isn't what he expected. It's not food. It's not drinkable water. None of that. What is it? Right, it's this drug. It's a narcotic, which they are selling to people, and people get in lines to buy. Why? Because if you buy it for a couple hours, you can forget the fact that you're living in hell on earth, right? He said that, right? And then he said this, and had he not said this, I wouldn't have even shared that story with you because it's dark and depressing, right? He said this, I realized then, back in 92, he said, I realized then that the supply line for evil was better established and a lot more efficient than the supply line for good. Realized then, the supply line for evil was better established and a lot more efficient than the supply line for good. Now, I think you look around and we can get a handle on that. I can remember talking to a friend of mine, Josh Hinges. As of 2012, he was the world grappling champ, right? He used to teach me jujitsu. Anyway, he's a hilarious guy. You hang out with him. What's he done? Well, for the last few years, he's been a government-employed agent working to rescue homeless teenagers, get them off the street. That's kind of the way it works. Why is that important? Well, according to him, right, supply line for evil, well established, good at what it does. According to him, within 48 hours of teenagers hitting the city, man, ran away, it's going to be great. Within 48 hours, they'll be picked up, and then they will be made to do unthinkable things, right, for food. Literally, that's the way it goes. And so he has to work rescuing them. I hear that, and I'm reminded of a story Max Lucado told years ago about this mother and daughter, Christina and Maria. Christina's the daughter, Maria's the mother. You read it, and it reads like a common story, one you've heard time and again. Right? Dad leaves home. Mom says, fine, I'll hold it together, does what she can. Daughter becomes a teenager. Mother and daughter, things get tense. Daughter says, forget this, I'm gone. Right? For Christina, the city looked better than the town. She said, look, I'm going to get there. Everything's going to work out. I'm reading this story, and it's like Josh is talking to me all over again. You know the outcome. She leaves, and that icy hand of death just grips her mom's heart. Why? Supply line of evil, and it finds her. He writes it this way. It was a few weeks later. The young Christina descended the hotel stairs. Her young face was tired. Her brown eyes no longer danced with youth, but spoke of pain and fear. And you've seen that. Well, that's the look in your friends when the world finds them, right? Family when the world finds them. And it doesn't even have to find them this way. Pipeline of evil. Her laughter was broken. Her dream had become a nightmare. 1,000 times over, she longed to trade those countless beds for her secure pallet. Talking about a village far off. Yet the little village was, he said, in too many ways, just too far away. She found out firsthand. And Josh talks about the students, that she found out the supply line for evil was better established and more efficient than the supply line for good. And you're going, well, those are stories far off. I'm going, maybe not, right? I got to wrestle with the fact that we're surrounded by screens. Our teenagers have been called by sociologists screenagers, right? And with every screen, you've got something that is fantastically useful. Oh man, it's fantastically useful. And with every one, you've got to be confronted and wrestle with the fact that this may be the best delivery system for porn, for gossip that the world has ever seen. The best delivery system the world has ever seen. No kidding. There it is. And by the way, that's what 2/3 of it is devoted to. Porn and gossip. You got to wrestle with the fact that we now live in a 24-hour news cycle kind of world where before 15 minutes of news at the end of the day would get it done. Now it's 24 hours a day. You flip on the television, and we do, right? Flip on the television, and they're telling you all the horrible stuff because that's what gets your attention and gets the ratings and the dollars flowing in. And so they tell this junk to keep you gripped. Why? Because we care about it. We want to change it. We want to do something about it. But you back away. what do we have? 24 hours a day, this pipeline for evil piped straight into our living room, and we sit there, and it ruins our ability to care, man. We're like, caring about all this stuff we can do nothing about, and it just numbs us out. What do we do about that? What do we do even about the fact that we've been discipled better and how to get people passionate about that sort of stuff, about the world, than we do? And I'm talking to Christians here. We've been better discipled. We know how to do that, get people passionate about a lot of that, more than we know how to get people passionate about God and to show them the life that He's given them, the reason why it matters. What do we do about that? What do we do about the fact that the supply line for evil is better established and a lot more efficient than the supply line for good? Right? It's a good question, by the way. Edmund Burke tells you why. Because the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing, for good women to do nothing. And so what do we do? What do we do? You go to Ephesians chapter 3, and Paul just starts having this conversation with you. By the way, in the passage we're going to, Philippians 2, man, this is the backdrop. He's going, man, the days you're living in are evil, and so what do you need to do? Right? Ephesians 5, he says, be very careful how you live, not as unwise, but as be wise about this, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. They're evil. Make the most of every opportunity. What do we do? What do we do? Philippians chapter 2, he's going to say this. Man, if you are standing in the dark, flip on the light. Man, if you're standing in the dark, turn on the light. There it is. The world around you is a dark place. Then shine brightly. He puts it this way in verse 15. He says, shine like stars in the sky. Shine like a star in the sky. If the pipeline for evil is well established and it's channeling junk toward those we care about, and Paul's telling us that God is calling us to stand firm and to shine bright, flip on the light. And how do we do that? How do we get that done? You go to verse 12, and Paul starts having this conversation. He just gives you these light principles that are pretty helpful. They're probably common, good reminders, though. He says this, verse 12, the first one comes in having this connection with your life that helps you to shine in that way. He says, Therefore, my dear friends, as you've always obeyed, not only in my presence, now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill His good purpose. Right? You look here, Paul says, hey, here's your reminder. If you're a Christian, right, live like Jesus. There it is. Live like Jesus, make a difference. Therefore, he's pointing back to the example of Christ. And so he says, live a life of humility, a life of service, a life of unity, unselfishness. Live a life where you're growing in truth, where you're living in grace and truth, where, just stand in this dark world and let your little light shine. Right? That's a little kid's song. Just get it done. Then he reminds you how it works, right? And I call this one, your iPhone insight for the day. Some of you know this about me, right? Got this iPhone, I don't know, about 3 years back. Yeah, I'm due for an update. It's cool, though. I'm still digging it, right? Some of you know my single favorite feature on this thing is not the phone or anything about it. It's the fact that I can take it, like I can push this button here, right? Oh. Got to unlock that action. Actually, I don't even have to, right? Swipe up, hit that. Oh, Insta-Light. Straight up and down. My favorite thing about this is the light feature on it. It's the fact that no matter what room I'm in, be dark, right? You can be trying to figure out, is that shirt navy or is it black? Bang, LED, right? The light, it shows true, I got this going down, It's my single favorite feature on it. How many of you have a phone with a light on it? That way I feel less like a dork right now. How many of you love that? All right, we're back. I'm in good company because you guys are there with me, right? Love that feature, but one thing I know is this. That feature will not be available to me if I don't do something every night. You know what it is, right? Plug it in to the charger. Some of you know this, right? For there to be power, there's got to be a source, right? You got to charge this phone up. And Paul's going, yeah, call it your iPhone Insight. A light's only as good as its power source. Power source, what are you plugging your life into? The fact of the matter is, our lives are always a flow-through sort of philosophy. So if we're filling our lives with all of that, guess what's going to come out? It's not brightness. It's what suppresses that sort of thing in our lives. And so if you're a follower of Jesus, Paul's whopping presupposition, and he really hits it in verse 13 here, is that we're going to be plugged into the power source. We're going to be plugged into God and let his life flow into us. Let him give us, and hear his words, the desire and the power to do what pleases him. I love the way John puts it in John chapter 15, where he says that Jesus is the true vine. And if we remain in him, right, if we stay connected to him, well, then we'll bear much fruit. Yeah, you're going to bear a lot of fruit with your life. Love, joy, peace, patience. You got all that spiritual fruit going on. Apart from him, nothing. No light, no light. The question is, are we connected? Are we connected? A.W. Tozer said years ago that 100 religious persons, right? Knit should be pluralized. You can do that in your mind. 100 religious persons knit into a unity by careful organization do not constitute a church any more than 11 dead men make a football team. True statement. It's a revealing statement too. Right? You read that and there's this reminder that if that's the case, then we have to stay connected to the source, or the light we're called to be will go out. And if that light goes out, it has dramatic ramifications. By the way, you know when it's happening in your life. I just say you move toward one of two extremes. Either you get caught up in hollow religion on the one side, where, oh yeah, you're coming to church, bang, bang, check to that box. I'm praying, check to that box. I'm tithing, check to that box. I'm, avoiding bad stuff, got that. I am, sounding spiritual with my life. There it is. I don't drink, smoke, chew, go with girls who do. Get a tattoo, paint my hair blue, go woohoo, not doing any of that stuff. Check, got it. You're doing all of that, but it's like the life of God isn't flowing into you. You're cooking off yesterday's charge. It's the way it goes. And Jesus, throughout his ministry, he pointed at people like that, religious leaders who did all of that. He says, wow, whitewashed tomb, you make it look good on the outside, but people get close to you, it's dead stuff. You're not shining bright. That connection slipped out, right? Or connection slipping out, you're either over there hollow religion or you're here. It's just a helpful response with your life, right? You're involved in the community. You're doing a lot of good. I mean, you're clothing people, right? We've got a pickup to help, people in Ottawa, surrounding towns, disaster hit. Awesome, right? You're doing that. That's cool. But that's where it stops. It's where it stops. Right? I got the go, but I don't have the gospel and the God piece of it. Right? That's not where it's at. See, it makes me sad too. It really does, right? I'm all about social justice. I'm not about soul justification, right? I got to work, I didn't get to worship. Right? And Paul's going, hey, look, whenever you're connected, both of those things come together and the light you're called to be shines brightly. Right? See, whenever you hear this, don't ever underestimate. Don't ever underestimate the importance of being here. Hebrews writer chapter 10 says, don't give up meeting together. Right? If you'll let it, this time right now can be something that charges you in a big way. It really can. Right? Where you're able to connect in a serious way with what God wants for your life, right? With his presence, power right here. Right? Don't underestimate the importance of this. Don't underestimate the impact of opening a Bible during the week. Some of you are like, man, it always seems like gibberish to me. That's cool. Sometimes you don't have to know the what. It's just cool to spend some time with the who, right? The living word, right? Start in the book of John. That'll help you out, right? Don't underestimate that. The importance of doing that every week. Don't underestimate the usefulness of memorizing a verse or of praying for someone. I say don't underestimate the value even of substituting an hour of TV time at the end of the day for, an hour of Right Now media time. Some of you know that, right? Netflix of Christian, stuff teaching tools, training tools. Or don't underestimate the importance of even starting your day. Man, listen to a Devo on your commute. I got sermons I listen to, right? Not everything's dull and stale, right? You do that, right? They're important. Why? Because when you're connected, light shines. It's light principle number one. A strong light needs a secure connection. So maybe we do that. We leave the light on that way. You hit verse 14 and Paul says, hey, there's more to this equation. If you really want to watch evil, be pushed away in your life and the lives of those you care about, that connection matters. That connection matters, and if you've never made that, that's serious business, right? And he goes on, verse 14. If you're a parent in the house, this is the verse you want your kids to memorize. Just laying that out there. You can hate the Bible, but you like this verse, especially on long road trips. We're about to do one, right? Do everything without grumbling or arguing. How much do what? Everything. Okay. You know what? Let's just read this together. This is a good one. Verse 14. Just read it with me and just let it sink into your soul. This is great. Do everything without grumbling or arguing. Do how much? Everything without what? Okay, just making sure. Making sure we're there together. How much was that? I missed it. How we do what? Everything. Everything without what? Yeah, other translation says complaining or arguing. So you get kind of where he's going with the grumbling bit. Okay. He says that when you do that, like this is a huge thing that keeps us from shining brightly, right? So you do that so that you may become blameless and pure. So that the connection happens. Children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Evil generation. You get it. Then you will shine, he says. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky as you hold out firmly the word of life. Do everything, he says, without grumbling or arguing. Grumbling and arguing. Right? Two words that show you the single greatest. I believe if not the single greatest, one of the greatest. And one of the biggest reasons why evil has a better pipeline than good does in our world. And it goes like this. It's because we end up valuing me more than we value mission. We value me more than we value mission, right? Like Frank Sinatra before us, we want it our way, right? We want to do it our way. There you go. Go fast food, and it's we want it our way. Was that McDonald's? Help me. Burger King, right? We want it our way. Some of you are like, yeah, I like it because of that. What now, right? It's where we live. And because of that, we start to value me more than we start to value mission. Because those are the case, instead of shining brightly in the opportunities that are all around us, we sit and we grumble, maybe quietly. There it is. Or we argue the whole time while we're doing it, and the watching world wants none of it. And by the way, there's an easy reason why we do that, right? You watch news at night, and you're just conditioned to see things where there are great needs and not be able to do anything about it. So what do? You talk about it, though. Right? So we've been well trained to just talk about things and not feel like, hey, let me engage in the process. So I'm good at pointing out everything that's wrong. I'm not so good at engaging. And so we sit on the sidelines and we wait for the right opportunity. And so what Paul's saying is this through it, right? Light principle number 2, that shining light, it's about capitalizing on your circumstances, not just the right circumstance. It isn't about looking for the right circumstance. It's about just capitalizing on your circumstance and making that the key. And that's the point. My dad showed this to me years ago. He really did. If you ask him, Dad will tell you about how before he went to Colorado State University, he went to a Bible college because he was thinking about being a preacher. That's the way it went. He got in Bible college, sat in a class on preaching, and in that class they assigned him this book on preaching. And in the preface to it, like the introduction of the book, The author said this. He said that if you can imagine doing anything else with your life and being content, do it by all means. Don't preach. Right? And he said it, why? Because preaching needs to be a calling. We've got that word that bounces around in the church, calling, and it's difficult enough that if you're not called, if it's not the only thing, you're going to wash out anyway, so just go get on with something else with your life. And Dad read that and he went, no, I can imagine doing something else. And so he did. Right? Went to Colorado State, degree in biology, master's degree in anatomy, moves to Arkansas, starts teaching junior high and high school science. He's doing that, serving in a church. That's just kind of what he does. Whenever this area church had a minister leave, so they're in between ministers, right? The minister search goes on. And this other preacher that Dad looked up to introduced him and my mom, right? So there you go. Riley came to my dad, who's also named Riley, which is just kind of funny. And he said, hey, Riley, there's this church that needs someone to preach at it. And I just want you to think about doing that for them until they can find someone else. There you go. Right? He made that ask, and Dad had a problem. And I wrote it down so I could get it right because he's going to listen to this. Right? He made the ask, and my dad had a problem, and I love him for it. Right? Because I just say that while he got the being discouraged from a particular type of ministry bit, while he got that part of following Jesus, being discouraged from a particular kind of ministry, he missed out on the part where you're supposed to pick and choose service and make sure it's convenient for you. He missed out on that. My dad has the unfortunate habit of being a servant first and then counting the cost later. Or maybe because he counted the cost first, he's a servant wherever he goes. And because of that unfortunate habit, long story short, he said yes, and he's been preaching for the last 45 years. They're still between ministers. You get how that goes, right? Man. Now, he preached. And the first sermon I ever preached was behind the pulpit that he preached behind. He preached, and we learned to love the church because he never resented it for a second. He preached, and we learned that Jesus was worth giving our time to. He preached just to be faithful, and I think maybe we're faithful because of that. Right? I look at his story and I'm reminded of this fact that shining light isn't about capitalizing and waiting for the right circumstance. It's just about capitalizing on your circumstance. It's about avoiding complaining, avoiding grumbling like the plague, so that we're open to shining light wherever we're at. Wherever we're at. See, friends, don't ever forget for a second that what Paul said is true, that we really do live in a crooked and perverse generation. That being the case, our joy in service may be the only light they ever see. And that being the case, man, shine bright. Shine bright. Live with gusto. Make the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Make the most of them. Capitalize on your circumstance, right? And then go here. Our last principle goes like this. Last part of 16 to verse 18. Paul says that if we do this, he says, I'll be able to boast on the day of Christ that I did not run or labor in vain. But even if I'm being poured out like a drink offering, even if I'm serving to complete what God has started, there's this sort of analogy. Even if I'm being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, completing what God started, I'm glad and rejoice with all of you, so you too should be glad and rejoice with me, right? I love this passage because you've got Paul just rejoicing in the Lord because he gets to complete the work that God is starting in their life, right? He's living an intentional life, and he's calling them and he's calling all of us to live an intentional life too. I love the way Andy Stanley puts it, this sort of call. in his book, Deep and Wide. And this is the Rory paraphrase of it. He just says, you know what, in life, whenever you look at and approach the mission God's given, he says, just think of it this way. He says, you're not responsible for filling someone else's cup. You're not responsible for that, but you are responsible for emptying your cup. You're not responsible for filling other people's cup. You're just responsible for emptying your cup. I put it another way, you're not responsible for whether or not someone's eyes are open, whether or not they see the light and respond to it. That's not it. But you are responsible for shining a bright light. You are responsible for shining bright light wherever you go. Completing that work that God is starting, meeting God in it. Right? We're responsible for that because there's this mission that God's called us to, and it's a matter of life and death. Think about it this way, and you'll have to play along with it even though it's not in play, and you'll find that out, right? I want us to try to clap every second. Can we do that? Just clap every second, and I'll just kind of talk you through the significance of what we're doing, right? So 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3. I was reading this past week that every second, 1.78 people, about 2 people, pass away around the globe, which means every time we clap our hands, 2 people are standing in front of their Maker. Now, if you take that, and you can stop, right? If you take that and just say, only half of them, right? About half of them don't know Jesus, never responded to the light. That means every second we clap, every second, I got to slow down a little bit, and you want to. Every second I clap my hands, another person goes on to live finally in a place their life has been partially. We call it hell, right? Lived it here, live it there. Right? And they're not just people around the world, they're people in our community living without hope. And they're not just people in our communities, they're people you work with, that you go to school with. And they're not just people that you work and go to school with. They're people you go to dinner with, you have breakfast with. They're people in your own homes. And that's a big deal. So my question goes like this, and I think it dovetails with Paul's. Are we intentionally shining the light of Christ in a way that they can see us, in a way that is attractive to them, that shows them the joy in what we have in front of us? Because in the end, that's all that matters. That's all that matters. I love the end of that story about the mother and the daughter, about Marie and Christina. It stuck with me for years, not because of the way it starts, but the way it ends just nails me. Right? Max Lucado says that, after that paragraph we read, that something significant goes down, right? Christina leaves her mother, walks into this pipeline for evil. It swallows her whole. And by the way, that's every parent's nightmare, every grandparent's nightmare. You get it. Evil finding and taking our kids. Maybe your kids are there now and you're just ripped apart about it. Right after that paragraph, it was a few weeks later, Christina descended the hotel stairs, young face tired, brown eyes no longer danced with youth, spoke of pain and fear, laughter broken, dream became a nightmare. Right? 1,000 times over, she longed to trade countless beds for a secure pallet, but the little village was in too many ways far away, right? After that paragraph comes this one. I love it. Max just writes this. He says, as she reached the bottom of the stairs, her eyes noticed a familiar face. She looked again, and there in the lobby mirror was a small picture of her mother. Christina's eyes burned and her throat tightened as she walked across the room and removed the small photo, and written on the back was this compelling invitation. It just goes like this. Whatever you've done, whatever you've become, it doesn't matter. Please come home. Please come home. Right? And he's able to write that paragraph because in the story, what you find is that the second Christina leaves and her mother finds out, her mom goes into action. Christina's walking into the dark and her mom knows, man, Light's got to find her. Light's got to find her. She goes into a photo booth, spends everything she has on pictures of herself. Takes the pictures, writes that on the back of all of them, goes to the city, and she walks into every hotel lobby, puts a picture, every brothel puts a picture, every business, every restaurant she can find, and hopes beyond hope for the conclusion that she's working for. And I back away from that, and I'm going, isn't that it? Isn't that it? Isn't that what we want for those we care the most about? Right? That the second they walk into a dark place, that Light's going to find them. And what length will we not go to make sure Light can find them? You know, I hear that and I'm reminded of another light. Right? You go and the Bible tells you that the light of the world stepped into the world, that God loved us enough that he sent his son an impossible distance from eternity to our time and space, right? To die a death we couldn't die, right? To pay a price we couldn't pay so that we could have life, so that we could see light, so that we could have hope, right? And as he did, we got this promise spoken over our life. Whatever you've done, wherever you've gone, it doesn't matter, just come home, right? And with that, right, he leaves open the possibility for the end of the story. And she did, and they did. You know, if you're hearing this today and you've never responded to that light, we're going to have time right now. The band's going to play, and we can just process this deep level and say, you know what, God, I want some of that light in my life. You know what? I've never accepted Jesus, said I want to follow him. Never been baptized. Today's the day. If you're there, I can meet you over there by the steps, and we can have that conversation. I can pray you through some of that. Maybe you're here today and you're going, you know what? I'm not connected and I know it. If you're there, guess what? Today's the day. Today's the day to get plugged in. Right, we've got a couple of songs coming where you can just connect with God in a real way. Just have a conversation with him. Start and just say, God, I want more. I want more than I'm living right now. I just want more. Guide me toward it. He'll start it. He'll start it. Maybe you're here today. And what I said, just like a knife in your heart. You're going, you know what, I haven't. People have been impacted by it. Maybe today's the day you come back to the foot of the cross and you're reminded. Just come home. Let's start again. Let's get it started today. Why don't you stand? We'll move in that direction. They're going to play, and we'll go.